My name is Charles Donovan, and at 55, I thought I had everything figured out. For most of my life, I had prided myself on being a good father. I worked tirelessly, often at the expense of my own health and happiness, to provide for my son, Zachary, and his wife, Emma. I'd always believed that family came first. I sacrificed my own dreams, my free time, my retirement plans, all for them. I thought this was what love and loyalty meant, what made me a good father and husband. But what I didn't realize, until that moment, was that my devotion had been nothing more than a one-sided, exhausting affair. It all began one chilly afternoon when Zachary called me over to his house. Now, Zachary had always been the apple of my eye, the son I'd raised with my own 2 hands, doing everything I could to make sure he had a better life than I did. His home was everything I had dreamed of for him. Spacious, with high-end finishes and furniture that glowed with the promise of success. As I entered his place, the warmth from the fireplace and the sharp scent of freshly brewed coffee made the house feel almost too perfect, almost like a museum. I'd helped pay for all of this, of course. The down payment for his home, the luxury car in the driveway, even the leather chairs in the living room, those were all my contributions, my sacrifices. And as I stood there, feeling the familiar weight of pride in my chest, I had no idea how close I was to having that pride crushed. Zachary's voice broke the silence, and I could tell something was off. He called me into the living room, his words awkward, stumbling over themselves, but I couldn't place why. He had always been confident, full of life, always ready with a joke or a warm smile, but now there was something fragile in his posture, something strained. "Dad," he said, nervously adjusting his tie as he stood by the window. "I need to talk to you about Christmas." Christmas. A time when families came together, celebrated, and shared the warmth of each other's company. That was how I always imagined the holidays. It was supposed to be a time for family, a time to reflect on the love we shared. I didn't think there was anything to talk about when it came to Christmas. But as I stood there, watching my son avoid eye contact, I felt a pang of unease twist in my gut. "Sure, son, what's going on?" I asked, not realizing that the question would soon lead me to an answer I wasn't prepared for. "Well," Zachary started, his voice faltering slightly, "Emma's parents are coming to visit," and he hesitated. "Well, they'd prefer it if you didn't join us this year." The words landed like a punch. I froze, blinking in disbelief. I stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation, some sign that this was a joke. But there was no sign. Zachary stood there, head lowered, his hand twisting the tie he was wearing as though he were trying to strangle the words before they left his mouth. My mind couldn't process what he had just said. "Wait, what?" I asked, the words barely coming out of my mouth. "Why wouldn't I be welcome? This is my family too." My heart was pounding in my chest now. I had given so much to ensure Zachary's life was comfortable. I had sacrificed my own future to fund his house, his car, his vacations. I poured my energy into making sure he had everything I never did. And now, here I was, being told that I wasn't welcome in his home for the most sacred of family holidays. A tightness grew in my chest. I struggled to keep my voice steady. Zachary's face turned a deep shade of crimson as he took a step back, looking at the ground. I could tell he wasn't going to give me an answer that would make sense. He shifted on his feet, visibly uncomfortable, like he couldn't find the words to explain himself. "Dad," he muttered, barely audible, "they're very particular about who they invite. I don't want this to cause any more problems." "Particular about who they invite?" I repeated slowly, trying to process what he was saying. The reality of it all hit me harder now. "You're telling me that I'm not welcome at Christmas because of them? After everything I've done for you?" I looked around the living room, my eyes scanning every corner, every inch of the space I had helped furnish. The marble countertops in the kitchen, the sleek leather furniture, all the home improvements I had paid for without hesitation. Every little luxury in their lives had been made possible because of me. I had taken out loans, refinanced my house, maxed out credit cards, all so Zachary and Emma could have the life they wanted. "You don't understand, Dad," Zachary said, his voice small now, regret dripping from every word. "I don't want to make things harder, but it's easier this way. You know how Emma's family is. They have their own traditions, and they don't really get along with you." The words struck me with the force of a sledgehammer. "They don't get along with me?" I repeated, trying to make sense of the madness. I had worked my entire life to give my son the best I could, and this was how I was repaid? I was nothing more than a burden to their perfect, socially polished life. "Dad, please," Zachary pleaded, his eyes finally meeting mine, but they were full of shame and guilt. "This is just how it has to be." My hand clenched around the armrest of the couch, knuckles turning white. I stood up, my body trembling, but not from anger. No, it was from hurt, from betrayal. "I've done everything for you, Zach. Everything. And now, I'm not even good enough to sit at your dinner table." I didn't wait for his response. I couldn't bear to hear the justifications or the excuses. I walked out of that room, past the family photos on the walls that now seemed to mock me. My face smiled back at me from each frame, but those smiles were now distant, fading with every step I took toward the door. I left without a word, stepping into the cold, silent night. The door shut behind me, sealing off the warmth of their perfect home. I got into my truck, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, the Christmas lights from the other homes reflected in the rearview mirror, mocking me as I drove away, a stranger in my own family. The road ahead felt long, darker than usual. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I had been a fool, hadn't I? I had given everything I had to them, all my time, all my money, and what did I get in return? Rejection. The very people I had loved most in this world were the ones who had cast me aside, leaving me to drive home alone. I didn't know where I was going, but one thing was clear. Something had to change. This wouldn't be the end. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I had given away so much of myself, and now I was taking it all back. The price of loyalty had been steep, but it was time to stop paying it. The days following that conversation felt like a blur. I spent the first few hours in a daze, my mind racing with anger, confusion, and a sinking sense of betrayal. I thought about everything I'd done for Zachary and Emma, how I'd pulled myself to the bone for them, how I had worked overtime, skipped vacations, and put my own dreams on hold just to make sure they were taken care of. And for what? To be discarded, ignored, and unappreciated. It was a bitter pill to swallow. I couldn't help but replay everything in my mind over and over, the words Zachary had said echoing in my head. "They don't really get along with you." I couldn't shake that feeling. That my own son had been too weak to stand up for me, to defend the man who had given so much for him. Instead, he let Emma's parents dictate who would and wouldn't be welcome in his life. I thought back to the house, the one with the polished marble countertops, the shiny new furniture, the two-car garage filled with expensive vehicles, all of it made possible by the sacrifices I had made. Zachary was driving a luxury car, one I had helped him buy, while I still drove the same old truck that had seen better days. The disparity was overwhelming, and in that moment, I realized just how much I had been taken advantage of. I had funded their dream life, but all the while I had been invisible to them. I was nothing more than a tool to be used when they needed something, then discarded when it no longer suited their interests. By the time I reached home, the realization hit me full force. My shoulders felt heavy, my mind clouded with the unfairness of it all. I had let them drain me emotionally and financially for far too long. I was done. I wasn't going to be their ATM anymore. I wasn't going to allow myself to be the man they could exploit without consequence. The next day, I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills and paperwork I had been avoiding. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to face the truth, take control, and stop being the man who gave everything away for nothing in return. I started with the bank statements. The mortgage payments, the credit cards, the loans, it was all right there in black and white. I had been sending them $2,500 every month for the past 5 years. 5 years of my life, gone. $2,500 every month, transferred out of my account and into theirs. I didn't even think about it anymore. It was just another automatic payment that disappeared before I could even see it. But now, as I looked at the numbers, the weight of it hit me like a ton of bricks. $2,500 a month, year after year. That was $30,000 a year. In 5 years, that was $150,000. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. $150,000. Gone. It wasn't just the mortgage payments either. There were the home improvements, the marble countertops, the designer furniture, the landscaping that cost more than my entire monthly budget. Emma had wanted all of it, and I had provided. I had kept thinking that I was helping them build something for their future, but in reality, I was just keeping their fantasy life afloat, the fantasy that I wasn't even invited into. The decision was simple, but it wasn't easy. I grabbed the phone and called the bank. I told them to cancel the automatic payments for the mortgage. I told them to cut the credit cards I had co-signed for Zachary and Emma. I told them to cancel everything. My heart raced as I said the words, but there was a certain power in them, a power I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I was taking control. The bank rep on the other end was polite, efficient, but I could hear the surprise in her voice. This was a big deal. "Are you sure you want to cancel this transfer, Mr. Donovan?" she asked, as if she were confirming my decision. "This is a significant amount of money." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steady. "It's time for them to figure it out on their own." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of freedom. I knew it would hit them like a ton of bricks, but that was the point. They needed to learn that their actions had consequences, and the reality was I wasn't going to keep paying for their mistakes, their overspending, and their sense of entitlement. The next few days were quiet. I went about my routine, but my mind was constantly on what I had done. There was no going back now. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. I wasn't being used anymore. I wasn't trapped in a cycle of guilt and responsibility that wasn't mine to carry. But then came the call. It was from Zachary, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "Dad," he said, his voice shaking, "I don't know what's going on with the bank, but the payments haven't gone through. We're in trouble, and I don't know what to do." I knew this was coming. I knew the moment I cancelled the payments they would come running. They would cry foul and ask for help, and I didn't care. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. "You don't have to worry about me anymore, Zach," I said, my voice calm. "You'll figure it out just like I did, the same way I did when I didn't have anyone bailing me out." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and I could hear the weight of his confusion and frustration. But I didn't feel sorry for him anymore. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. This wasn't my mess to clean up, this was theirs. "Dad, please," he pleaded, his voice growing quieter. "I didn't know. I didn't realize." I cut him off, not out of anger, but because there was nothing more to say. "You should have, Zach. You should have realized what I was doing for you, but you didn't, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences." I hung up, the finality of it echoing in the silence of the room. I didn't feel anger or guilt or regret. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, relief. I wasn't responsible for them anymore. They had to stand on their own 2 feet now. But the fallout was just beginning. I knew there would be more calls, more manipulation, and more attempts to guilt me into fixing their problems. But I was ready. I had made my decision, and I was done being their savior. Christmas Eve arrived, and instead of spending it with them, I found myself alone in a coffee shop. I sat by the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I didn't feel that old pull of obligation, that sense of duty that had been drilled into me for so long. I was free. I let out a breath, feeling the weight of the past few days lift from my chest. I wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I was living for myself. And it felt damn good. The days that followed my decision were strangely quiet. I had always been accustomed to the chaos of family life, to the never-ending cycle of obligations, responsibilities, and expectations. But now, with that weight lifted off my shoulders, the silence felt almost oppressive. It wasn't the kind of silence you get when you're alone, but at peace. No, this was the kind of silence that came from knowing you had done something irreversible, something that was going to change everything. It didn't hit me all at once, though. The magnitude of what I had done slowly crept up on me, like a shadow that stretches out before the sun sets. The calls from Zachary never came. I knew they were probably scrambling, trying to figure out how to make up for the sudden absence of my financial support. And Emma, I could already picture her, perfectly poised, pretending that everything was fine while she had no idea how to pay the bills or maintain her perfect image without me there to back her up. But even as I thought about them, a part of me didn't care. I knew I had made the right decision. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in, making me question everything I had done. Had I gone too far? Was I being too harsh? These questions would flood my mind, especially late at night when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. But every time I thought about the years I had spent giving my time, my money, my energy, and receiving nothing in return but disregard, the doubts faded. I had to remind myself that I wasn't their provider. I wasn't their safety net. I was their father, and that should have meant something. On Christmas Eve, I took a drive through the neighborhood, looking at the lights twinkling in the windows of homes I once thought I'd be a part of. It was hard not to feel a pang of loneliness, a hollow emptiness that settled in my chest. Every house I passed felt like a mirror of the life I had once envisioned for myself and my family. The families inside were gathering around dinner tables, sharing meals, creating memories. But for me, it was just another night. Another night where I was sitting alone with the choices I had made. That evening, as I sat in my old armchair with a glass of whiskey in hand, I felt the weight of the years. My eyes flickered over to the mantelpiece, where Maria's photo sat next to a newer one of me with Rosa's family. It was the first holiday I had spent with people who actually wanted me there, people who valued my company. They didn't care about my money or my status. They just cared about me, the man who had shown up for them, the man who could sit at their table and laugh without any strings attached. The warmth of that thought comforted me, and for the first time in months, I felt something akin to peace. But even as I sat there, savouring the solitude, my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen and saw Zachary's name flashing in the corner. I let it ring through, unwilling to pick up. I wasn't ready to hear the same old excuses, the same tired promises that things would change, that he would make it right. I had heard it all before, and this time I wasn't falling for it. By the time New Year's came around, I was starting to settle into my new routine. The mornings felt easier, without the constant weight of financial worries pulling at me. I wasn't tracking my bank balance every few hours or calculating how many more payments I had to make. I was just living, and I liked it. For the first time in years, I had room to breathe. Then, on January 3rd, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Zachary, but Emma. I stared at the screen for a long moment, hesitant. I didn't want to take the call, didn't want to hear whatever justification she had prepared. But I knew I had to. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about facing what I had done and accepting that the consequences were now out of my hands. I answered the phone, my voice neutral. "Emma." "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. There was no Happy New Year or How are you? The tension between us was palpable, like a weight hanging in the air. "Go ahead," I said, leaning back in my chair, waiting. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. She had taken so much from me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. "I heard what happened with the mortgage," she started, her tone soft but tinged with frustration. "This is unfair, Charles. You can't just leave us high and dry like this." I didn't respond immediately. Her words were sharp, calculated, but there was a thread of vulnerability in her voice. She was trying to manipulate me, I could tell, but something in the way she spoke made me pause. It was the first time in years that I had heard her sound anything but entitled, anything but certain that I would always be there to bail her out. "I've been unfair, Emma?" I asked, the bitterness in my voice hard to suppress. "You've been taking from me for years, expecting me to foot the bill for every mistake, every impulse, every luxury. I was just a paycheck to you, a safety net. Well, I'm not your ATM anymore. You've got to figure this out on your own." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost defeated. "I never meant for it to be this way," she said, her tone more honest than I had ever heard it. "I didn't want you to feel used, but you've always been there, always helped, and I didn't know how to say no." "You should have said no, Emma," I replied, the words heavy with years of accumulated frustration. "You should have said no a long time ago. I didn't need your manipulation. I needed respect. I needed to be more than just a source of money to you. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never realized how much I hurt you. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to hear more, to hear her take responsibility for what she had done. But I knew better. She was sorry because she was losing, because her perfect life was falling apart. She wasn't sorry for how she treated me, but for how her world was now crumbling. I'm sorry too, Emma, I said finally, my voice firm. I'm sorry for letting this go on for so long, but I won't be sorry for making the decision I did. It's time for you and Zachary to grow up. I ended the call with a sense of finality. I wasn't angry anymore, just weary. I had done my part, given all I could. Now it was their turn. The responsibility was on them to fix their own mistakes, to rebuild their lives without my help. I wasn't going to be the man who enabled them anymore. That night, I poured myself another glass of whiskey and sat in silence, the sound of the crackling fire filling the room. I thought about the road ahead, about the future. The life I had spent so long building for others was gone now, but in its place something else was beginning to take shape. A life that was mine. A life where I was free. Free from the guilt. Free from the obligations. Free to be the man I had always wanted to be. And that was the greatest gift I could give myself. By the time February rolled around, the fog of the past few months started to clear. It had been a hard, painful few weeks, but I was finally starting to feel like myself again. The weight of obligation, of responsibility, was no longer hanging over me. I had spent so long trying to please everyone else, Zachary, Emma, even their extended families, that I had lost sight of who I was. For the first time in years, I wasn't measuring my worth by what I could give, but by what I could reclaim. The mornings, once filled with the dread of balancing checkbooks and figuring out how to help them make ends meet, now felt light. I was no longer worried about how I was going to come up with the next mortgage payment or pay for Emma's latest must-have luxury. I was actually waking up without feeling exhausted, and I could focus on things that had nothing to do with them. My mind, which had been preoccupied with their needs for so long, was free to focus on what I needed. I had taken a step back from the routine of financial survival. For the first time in years, I had disposable income. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to start doing things for me. I'd been walking more. Walking in the mornings when the air was crisp before the world became busy and loud. I started picking up hobbies I had long neglected. Gardening, reading, even painting. Small things that made me feel connected to myself again, to who I was before I became the provider. But every so often I'd get that nagging feeling in the back of my mind, the feeling that I had done something wrong. The guilt, the part of me that still believed I was supposed to help them, still believed that family meant sacrificing everything for them, came creeping in. Was I being too harsh? Was I being selfish? But then I'd remind myself, no, this was my life, and it was time to live it for myself. Still, Zachary's absence from my life hung heavy. I couldn't completely shake the guilt of not being there for him during his time of need. I kept thinking about our conversations, the way he had apologized but couldn't fully understand why I'd done what I had. Every time I saw something that reminded me of him, something small, like a picture of us at his graduation or the last birthday gift I gave him, I felt a pang. But then I'd remind myself that this was a necessary step. He had to learn to stand on his own. And so did I. That was when I got the letter. It came on a Tuesday morning, as I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping my coffee and staring out the window at the grey sky. I hadn't been expecting anything, so when the letter slid through the door, it caught me off guard. It was from Zachary. My stomach tightened as I opened it, my mind racing with thoughts of what it could be. Was it another apology? Was it a plea for help? I unfolded the letter and started reading. "Dad," it began, "I know we haven't spoken in a while, and I understand why you're upset. I've had time to think, and I realize how much I've taken from you, how much I've asked of you without ever considering your feelings. I'm truly sorry. I wish I could change things, but I know I can't. I'm reaching out because I've realized something. Your decision to stop helping me, to stop enabling me, was the best thing that could have happened for me. I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now. I see how much I've relied on you, and how much that has cost both of us. You're right. I need to grow up. I need to stand on my own. I can't keep hiding behind you. I want to make things right, Dad. I know it's going to take time, and I know I can't expect you to just forgive me overnight, but I want to try. I hope that one day we can rebuild our relationship, not based on money or favors, but on respect and love. I sat there, staring at the letter for what felt like an eternity. Zachary's words were simple, but they were the first time he had truly acknowledged the depth of his mistakes. He was owning up to his part in everything that had gone wrong between us, and for the first time I felt a sense of relief. Maybe he was ready to learn. Maybe he could finally see what I had been trying to teach him all along. But the letter wasn't just an apology, it was a turning point for me as well. It wasn't about whether or not I was ready to forgive him. It was about me realizing that I wasn't the only one who had been wronged. Yes, Zachary had taken advantage of me, but I had also allowed it to happen. I had enabled him, allowed myself to be used. And in doing so, I had robbed both of us of the chance to have a real, equal relationship. I thought about the past few months, the changes I had made in my life, the freedom I had reclaimed. I had started living for me, not for them. I had started making choices based on what was best for me and not out of guilt or obligation. Zachary's letter wasn't just an apology, it was a sign that he was ready to make his own choices too. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for us to start rebuilding, not from a place of dependency, but from a place of mutual respect. I didn't call him right away. I needed time to process it. I needed to think about what it meant for me, what it would mean for my future. But I did decide that I wasn't going to close the door completely. I wasn't going to let the past define us. He had made mistakes, and so had I. But that didn't mean we couldn't start fresh. That didn't mean there wasn't hope. The weeks went by, and things slowly started to shift. I didn't dive back into their world, not yet. But I did start reaching out, little by little. A text here, a phone call there. We talked, not about money or what I could do for them, but about life, about how things had been, how things could be. And as we began to talk more, something shifted between us. There was a tentative understanding, a cautious optimism that hadn't been there before. He was growing up, and so was I. One day, Zachary asked if he could come over for lunch. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what to expect. When he showed up, he looked different. Not just physically, there was something in his posture, in his eyes, that told me he had changed. We sat down at the table, and for the first time in years, we just talked. We didn't talk about money, or expectations, or old wounds. We just talked about work, about life, about the things that really mattered. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was talking to the son I had always hoped for, the son who had finally learned what it meant to stand on his own. It wasn't easy. It wasn't going to be fixed in a day or a month or even a year, but it was a start. And that was enough. I sat back in my chair, looking at Zachary with a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. We weren't where we needed to be yet, but we were getting there, slowly but surely. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to take the next step. It was late March when Zachary called again. This time his voice was different, steadier, more mature. The nervousness that had once been a constant undercurrent when we spoke had faded, replaced by a tone that was almost hopeful. It was a strange feeling, hearing my son speak to me like this, after all that had happened. I never thought I'd hear him express gratitude for what I had done for him, but there it was, coming through loud and clear. "Dad, I just wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "For everything. I've been thinking a lot about what we've talked about what you've done for me all these years, and I've realized something. I've been selfish. I've been taking everything you've given me without ever really considering how it affected you. I want you to know I'm sorry for that." I was sitting at the kitchen table when I heard those words. My hand gripped the coffee mug so tightly I thought it might crack. I hadn't realized how much I'd been waiting for that moment, waiting to hear him take responsibility for the mess we had both created. But hearing it now, it didn't bring relief like I thought it would. Instead, there was a weight to it, a heaviness that reminded me of just how deep the damage had gone. "I appreciate you saying that, Zach," I said, my voice steady. even though my chest felt tight. But it's not just about saying sorry. It's about changing. It's about showing me that you're ready to take responsibility for your life and not rely on others to fix your mistakes. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. I know, Dad. I get that now, he replied, and there was something in his voice that told me he was finally starting to understand. I'm ready to take that step. I want to do things differently this time. I don't want to keep taking from you and expecting you to fix everything. I sat there for a long moment, processing what he said. This wasn't the same son who had demanded money from me without a second thought. This was a man, grown up, humbled, and ready to move forward. The realization settled into me like a cold drink of water, sharp and clear. I had been waiting for this, but I didn't know how much I needed it until now. You've got a long road ahead of you, Zach, I said, my voice gentler now, but I believe you can do it. Just don't expect me to do the heavy lifting anymore. You've got to carry your own weight from here on out. That's the only way you're going to grow. Yeah, I get it, he said, a little laugh in his voice. I'm ready, and I'll show you, I promise. The conversation ended with a quiet, unspoken understanding between us. I didn't expect things to change overnight. I didn't even expect them to change all at once. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page, like we were finally moving in the right direction. But even with this new understanding between us, the question still lingered in my mind. Was I ready to truly forgive him? I had spent so many years giving and giving, and now that the dust was starting to settle, I found myself asking whether forgiveness was enough. Was it enough to let go of all the resentment and hurt, or was there something more I needed to do for myself to fully heal? As March came to a close, I found myself spending more time thinking about the future. My future. What did I want it to look like now that I was free from the constant weight of financial obligation? What did I want to do with my life now that I wasn't tied to their needs, their demands? I started small, doing things that made me feel good. Things I had put off for far too long. I enrolled in a woodworking class at the local community centre. I had always enjoyed working with my hands, building things, but life had always gotten in the way. Now, I had the time to focus on something just for me. It was a small thing, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had lost somewhere along the way. I also began taking trips to places I had wanted to visit for years. Nothing big, just day trips to nearby parks or towns I had always meant to explore, but never had the time for. I started hiking again, something I hadn't done since before all the financial stress had taken hold of me. There was something about being outside, in the quiet of nature, that helped me clear my mind and think more clearly. It was a reminder of what I had been missing: peace, space to breathe, a life that wasn't filled with obligations. But as much as I started to enjoy my own company, there were still days when I felt the loneliness creeping in. It wasn't the kind of loneliness that came from being physically alone, though. It was the emotional kind, the kind that made me realize how much I had sacrificed, how much I had given away, and how little I had in return. There were days when I missed the old connection I had with Zachary, the times when we could laugh together, talk about the future. But I knew those days were gone, and they weren't coming back. I had to accept that. The day I saw Zachary again, it felt different. He came over to my house unannounced, which was something he hadn't done in a while. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I opened the door, he was standing there, looking at me with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly, shifting on his feet. "I wanted to come by and thank you again, for everything, for giving me the chance to make things right." I didn't say anything at first, just studied his face. He looked different, more mature, more grounded, but there was still a part of him that felt like the son I had raised. He had been through a lot, and I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, he was ready to take it. "You've got a lot of work to do, Zach," I said finally, stepping aside to let him in. "But I'm glad you're finally getting it. I'm proud of you, but don't expect me to carry you anymore. This is your fight now." "I know," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm ready to fight." We sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on equal ground. There were no expectations, no financial strings attached. Just a father and a son, talking about life, about mistakes, about the future, and for the first time I felt a sense of peace about it. The weight that had burdened me for so long was starting to lift. We were finally on the road to something real, something that wasn't based on what I could do for him, but on who we were to each other. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but we were finally moving in the right direction, and for the first time in a long time, I could say I was truly proud of him, and I was proud of myself too. I had made it through the hardest part. Now, the real work could begin. The days started blending together as the spring moved in. With the sun finally starting to break through the clouds, I found myself waking up earlier, eager to feel the warmth of the light on my face. I'd been spending more time outdoors lately, walking through the neighborhood, watching as the trees began to bud, the flowers bloomed, and the world seemed to renew itself after a long, cold winter. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of rejuvenation. Life was slowly but surely returning to me, piece by piece. Zachary's calls had become more frequent, and I could feel the shift in him. He had been slowly rebuilding not just his life, but our relationship. It was strange, this new dynamic between us. We had spent so many years lost in misunderstandings and unspoken expectations, yet here we were, trying to carve out a new space for each other in a world that had seemed so far out of reach just a few months ago. But even as things seemed to be moving forward, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was still walking a fine line. Was I really ready to forgive him fully? Was I ready to accept that he had changed, that he was truly different? I didn't know. And that uncertainty lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow that refused to disappear. Zachary had started going to therapy, something I hadn't expected but was oddly proud of him for. He was trying to do the hard work that I hadn't been able to do for him, work that he had to do on his own. I couldn't force him to change, couldn't be the one to do the heavy lifting, but I saw the effort. I saw him trying, and for the first time in years, I believed that maybe he was capable of standing on his own. One evening I received a call from Zachary, but this time there was something different in his voice. It wasn't the usual uncertainty or apprehension. It was confidence, or maybe a hint of vulnerability I hadn't heard from him before. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot," he started. "And I've made some big decisions. I've talked to Emma, and we both agree it's time to downsize. We're selling the house. We've been living beyond our means for too long. And I know that this is going to take time, but we're finally doing it. I wanted to tell you first." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process his words. This wasn't just about a new house or a change in lifestyle. This was about him finally acknowledging the reality of his choices and taking responsibility for the consequences. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected, pride. Genuine pride in my son. "That's a big step, Zach," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you. It's not going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do." "I know," he replied, his voice full of conviction. "I'm ready to make the changes, Dad. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes, and I know it's going to take time to rebuild, but I'm committed to doing it. I know I've let you down, but I want to prove that I can get it right this time." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time in a long while, I believed him. This wasn't just lip service. This wasn't a quick fix or a temporary change. He was doing the hard work, and it was a relief to know that he was finally taking control of his life in the way I had always hoped he would. It was the first time he had ever shown me that he could be the man I always knew he had the potential to be. "I'm here, Zach," I said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere. But you have to do this for you, not for me, not for anyone else. Do it because it's what you need, not because you think it will make me proud." "I know," he said softly. "I'm doing it for me." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The relief I felt was almost overwhelming. This wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for both of us. It was the first step toward healing the years of mistakes and missed opportunities. And while I knew we weren't done yet, while I knew the road ahead would be long and full of challenges, I could see a glimmer of hope. Over the next few weeks, we stayed in touch more regularly. Zachary and Emma had started the process of downsizing, putting their large home on the market and moving into a smaller, more affordable place. It was a slow process, but they were both determined to make it work. I heard about the meetings with the realtor, the discussions about what they needed to keep and what they needed to let go of. I didn't get involved. This was their journey, not mine. But I offered advice when they asked for it, and I made sure they knew I was there if they needed help. I wasn't going to step in and fix everything for them like I had in the past, but I could offer my support in a way that felt healthier for both of us. There were still moments when the past crept up on me. I'd think about the years I had spent working overtime, skipping vacations, and sacrificing my own happiness to make sure they were okay. There were moments when the bitterness would rise, when I'd catch myself feeling like I had been taken for granted, like I had been the one left behind. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. The more time I spent focusing on myself, the more I realized that I didn't need their approval or validation to feel worthy. I didn't need them to appreciate my sacrifices. I needed to appreciate myself. I started going to the community center more regularly, making friends, connecting with people who shared my interests. It felt good to be part of something that wasn't tied to my family or my past mistakes. I had found a place for myself outside of the roles I had been playing for so long, the role of the father, the provider, the martyr. For the first time, I was just Charles. But as I moved forward, I still found myself wondering, was this enough? Was this the life I had wanted for myself all along? Could I truly move on from everything that had happened without holding on to the past? I didn't have all the answers, but I was starting to believe that I didn't need them. One evening I sat outside on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset as the cool spring air swept through the trees. It was a peaceful moment, and I realized something then. I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I wasn't worried about what might happen or whether I'd have enough time to rebuild my life, because I had already started. And that in itself was enough. Zachary still had a long road ahead of him, and I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect overnight. But he was on his way, and that was all I could ask for. He was finally growing up, and so was I. The future, it seemed, was full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace it. The weather had finally turned, and spring was in full swing. The days were longer now, the sun warmer, and I found myself more often than not stepping outside to soak in the changing world around me. It was as though the universe was in sync with the shift inside me. Everything was slowly coming back to life. It felt strange at first, this quiet sense of peace. For so many years, I had been so tied up in responsibilities and sacrifices that I didn't realize how much of my own life had been put on hold. Now, with the weight lifted off my shoulders, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in forever. Zachary and I hadn't talked much in the past few weeks, but I knew he was still working on rebuilding his life. He had sold the big house, and he and Emma had moved into a smaller, more manageable place. I had heard from him a couple of times, quick check-ins, nothing heavy, just casual conversations about their progress. I didn't mind the silence, though. I didn't need him to need me like before. I was no longer his crutch, his fallback. I had done my part, and now it was time for him to do his. If anything, I was proud of him. He was taking responsibility, and that meant more than anything I could have given him. As for me, the days were starting to feel more like mine again. I began to spend more time at the community center. I had joined a woodworking class, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for. There was something therapeutic about working with my hands, crafting something from raw wood into something useful, something beautiful. The process of turning a piece of wood into something meaningful was a metaphor for the changes I had been making in my own life. I had felt like a raw, unfinished project for so long, but now I was beginning to shape myself into something I could be proud of. I still thought about my past decisions, the years I had spent trying to be everything for everyone else. I thought about Maria, about the life we had built together before she passed, and how much of that I had sacrificed after her death. I'd always thought that taking care of my family, providing for them, was the right thing to do. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had poured all of my energy into them and lost sight of the fact that I needed to be whole first. But that was the past, and it was starting to feel more and more distant with each passing day. It was one evening in late April when I got another call from Zachary. This time his voice was different. There was a weight to it, a seriousness I hadn't heard before. It was late, and I was just finishing up a small project in the garage, the light from my workbench illuminating the space around me. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered the phone. "Dad," Zachary said, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to talk to you about something." I paused, wiping my hands again, my heart picking up pace. Of course, what's going on? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then finally he spoke. "It's about Emma," he said quietly. She told me something tonight. She's been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a punch. My mind immediately began racing, but I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. He had always been so open with me, but this was different. This was something deeper, something that felt like it could break everything he had worked so hard for. "I don't know what to do, Dad," Zachary continued, his voice shaking now. "She says she's confused, says she's been unhappy for a while. I don't know what to believe." I sat down on the stool in the garage, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. I had seen this coming in some way, though I hadn't expected it to happen so suddenly. Zachary had been through so much already, losing his job, the financial strain, the burden of our strained relationship. Now, this? I could hear the vulnerability in his voice, the rawness of someone who felt like their whole world was coming apart. "Zach," I said softly, trying to steady my own voice, "I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you need to know that this is part of life. Relationships aren't always easy, and sometimes they don't work out the way we want them to. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you need to take care of yourself first. Don't lose yourself in someone else's decisions, and remember, you don't have to fix everything. You're not responsible for her happiness." "I know, Dad," he said, a long sigh escaping him. "It's just hard. I thought we were doing better. I thought we had everything figured out." "I get it," I said, my voice firm now. "You want to make it work. But you can't carry someone else's baggage. You've been doing that for so long, and it's time for you to stand on your own. Whatever happens with Emma, whatever happens next, you need to do what's right for you." I could hear him taking deep breaths on the other end of the line. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I feel lost." "Then find yourself again," I said, a small sense of pride swelling in my chest. "You've been finding your way back for a while now. Don't let this take you off course. You've learned to stand on your own 2 feet, Zach. Don't let anyone make you forget that." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought he might have hung up. But then he spoke, his voice steadier this time. "Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words settle in. I didn't have all the answers, and I couldn't fix everything for him. But that was okay. He wasn't asking me to fix it. He was asking for guidance, for a reminder that he wasn't alone. "You don't need me to fix things anymore," I said softly. "You've got everything you need inside you. Just remember to take care of yourself, Zach." "I will," he said, his voice more confident now. "I'll figure this out. Thanks for always being there." I ended the call and sat in the garage for a while, staring out at the street as the night settled in. The weight of his words, the raw emotion in his voice, was still heavy in my chest. I knew this was far from over. Zachary had a long road ahead of him, just as I did. But the difference now was that we were no longer walking that road alone. We were learning to stand on our own, and maybe that was the first real step toward healing for both of us. The next morning, I woke up early as usual, the sunlight streaming through the blinds in my bedroom. I didn't feel the sense of dread I used to feel about facing another day of obligations. I didn't feel the weight of someone else's expectations pushing me down. I felt free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about what was ahead. Zachary's journey wasn't over. Neither was mine. But for the first time in years, I believed we were both heading in the right direction, together but apart. And that was okay. It was enough. It was the kind of spring day that makes you feel like the world is beginning anew, Warm sun, a soft breeze, and the unmistakable scent of blooming flowers in the air. It was a Saturday, and I found myself standing outside on the porch, sipping my coffee and watching the world around me. The neighborhood was quiet, as it often was this time of day. People were out running errands, walking their dogs, or enjoying the warmth of the season. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace with myself. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change, both for Zachary and for me. We had both been through so much, and although we hadn't completely healed, there was a quiet understanding between us now. It wasn't perfect, and there were still a lot of things we needed to figure out, but the foundation was there. We were moving in the right direction, and I wasn't sure I could have said that a year ago. Zachary's phone calls had become a bit more frequent, and I could hear the difference in his voice. He wasn't just apologizing anymore or trying to explain himself. He was sharing his life with me, talking about the changes he was making, and most importantly, asking for advice. Not because he needed it, but because he genuinely valued my opinion. That meant everything to me. It was the sign I had been waiting for, the sign that he had truly grown up, that he wasn't just looking for handouts anymore. But it wasn't just about Zachary. It was about me too. The changes I had made in my own life were starting to feel more permanent. I wasn't stuck in the same cycle of giving and expecting nothing in return. I wasn't waiting for anyone to validate my sacrifices. I had learned how to stand on my own, to take care of myself without relying on others. It was freeing in ways I hadn't expected. The freedom didn't just come from financial independence, it came from emotional independence. I didn't need anyone's approval to feel like I mattered. A week after our last conversation, Zachary came over to visit. It wasn't for any particular reason, other than to check in and spend some time together. He had mentioned a few weeks ago that he was working on a new project, something he was passionate about, and I was curious to hear more. When he arrived, he looked different. Not in any obvious way, but there was a new sense of purpose in his eyes. He seemed more grounded, more at peace with himself. We sat down at the kitchen table and he immediately started talking about the project he had started. It was a business idea, one he had been dreaming about for years, but had always put off, thinking he wasn't capable of starting something on his own. But now he was moving forward with it, taking the steps to make it happen. "I've been thinking about it for a while now," he said, his voice steady. "I know it's going to be a lot of work, but I think I can do it. I'm ready to take the leap, Dad. I want to build something that's mine, something I can be proud of." I listened, letting him speak. I could hear the conviction in his voice, and it reminded me of the younger version of him, the one who had always dreamed big but had been too afraid to take action. But this time there was no hesitation. He was ready. "That's a big step, Zach," I said, my voice calm but full of pride. "But I'm proud of you. I'm glad you're taking this chance. Just remember, the road won't be easy. You've got to be prepared for setbacks, for challenges. But if you're really committed, I know you can make it happen." He nodded, his expression serious. "I'm ready for the challenges. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm ready to work for it. I've been taking it one step at a time, making sure I'm setting up a solid foundation before jumping in. I want to do this right." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "You've learned a lot these past few months, Zach, and I know you'll make it work. Just keep your head on straight and stay focused. You've got the right attitude." We spent the next hour talking about his plans, his goals, the steps he needed to take, and the hurdles he might face. It was like looking at a completely different person, someone who had finally figured out what it took to make it on his own. And it was everything I had hoped for. He was no longer the man who relied on others to solve his problems. He was becoming the man I had always known he could be. As we wrapped up our conversation, Zachary stood up and gave me a hug. It was a simple gesture, but one that meant more than I could say. We had never been the type of family to show affection openly, but this felt different. This was a hug that wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about anything other than love. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said quietly, looking me in the eyes. "For everything you've done for me. I don't think I could ever fully repay you for all the sacrifices you've made, but I'm going to do my best. I want to make you proud." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I kept my composure. "You don't need to repay me, Zach," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're already making me proud. Just keep going. Keep doing the right thing, and I'll always be proud of you." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. There was so much unspoken between us, so much history. But in that moment, all I could feel was a sense of peace. Zachary had finally found his way, and I had finally found mine. We were both on separate journeys, but we were moving forward, and that was enough. As he left, I went back to my chair, feeling a deep sense of contentment wash over me. I was proud of him, yes, but more than that, I was proud of myself. I had made the decision to stop being the man who gave everything away without expecting anything in return. I had learned to say no, to put myself first, to create the life I wanted to live. It wasn't easy. It still wasn't perfect. But I was finally living for myself. The rest of the evening passed quietly. I spent some time in the garage, working on another project. I wasn't rushing through it. I was savoring the process, enjoying the act of creating something with my hands. It was a simple pleasure, but it was mine. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. The path I had walked had been long and difficult, but it had brought me here, to a place of peace, of understanding, and of growth. And I knew that, no matter what came next, I was ready for it. I was Charles Donovan, and for the first time in a long time, I was finally living the life I had been meant to live. In life, it's important to understand that self-worth isn't tied to what you can give others, but to how you take care of yourself. Sacrificing for family and loved ones is admirable, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your own well-being. Learning to say no when necessary and setting boundaries is a form of self-respect. Don't be afraid to put yourself first, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. True love and respect, whether from family or others, should be mutual, not transactional. It's also crucial to embrace growth, both personally and emotionally. People make mistakes, but acknowledging them and taking responsibility is the first step toward change. As you move forward, focus on what you can control and understand that your actions and decisions define your path, not the expectations of others. Don't be afraid to stand on your own 2 feet. There is strength in independence. Finally, remember that relationships should be built on respect, trust, and support, not guilt or obligation. Life is a journey of growth and self-discovery, and the only way to truly move forward is by staying true to who you are and what you need.